Israeli opposition parties have struck a deal to form a new governing coalition, paving the way for the removal of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the longest-serving leader in the nation's history. The announcement was made by centrist opposition leader Yair Lapid and his new coalition partner, Naftali Bennett, an ultranationalist tech millionaire and former Netanyahu ally. The move could prevent Israel from holding a fifth consecutive national election in under 3 years. If the coalition agreement is approved by the Israeli parliament, the country will see a new prime minister, and Netanyahu's record 12 years in power could come to an end. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer is following this for us from London, and she joins us now. So, Liz, just help us understand what agreements were made under the new coalition deal and how it will work.
It went right up to the wire. Basically, there are 120 seats in the Israeli parliament, and 8 parties grouped together so they would have 61 seats, so a majority of 1 that would make them eligible to hold power. Now, there must have been extraordinary horse trading behind the scenes, and they had until midnight to do it. The bargaining went till 11:22, and it would have been hammer and tongs. And we know that, for example, the man who will be the next prime minister, Naftali Bennett, he's only got 7 seats of this 61, but his support was crucial. So he would have said to them, okay, I'll join you, but my price is I get to be the prime minister for the first 2 years. And then they've agreed that they'll hand off to the secular centrist politician of the Likud party, and that gives you some idea of how complex and delicate and conciliatory this bloc is. Now, it could only last for 10 minutes. There are going to be some big challenges coming up. For example, passing a budget. Let's say they do get voted into power. Their spending priorities are going to be wildly different, and they could fall at the first hurdle, which means that Israel would go back into a 5th election in 2 years.
So, Liz, I know that we've seen some comments coming from the PM's office, which he seems to indicate that this is sort of a left-wing coalition government. Just remind our viewers that, what's fascinating about this sort of coalition is that it's really 3 sort of almost separate constituencies that have decided to come together to try and oust Netanyahu.
The 3 main ones, that's right. So we've got the right, very far right of center party that you mentioned early on. It's called Yamina. It's Naftali Bennett's party, and it is very much associated with defending the settlers in the West Bank and the expansion. And Naftali Bennett himself has said that he is not in favor of a Palestinian state anytime. So he is what you would call far right in Israeli politics. And then, incredibly, you've got the United Arab List, an Arab-led party that is in parliament to advocate for the rights and the quality of life of Israeli Arabs. And, 15 years ago, it would have been unimaginable that an Arab party would have joined a governing coalition in Israel. It is the first time in history it's ever happened, and it will be very interesting to see what compromises they're prepared to make to stay in this coalition in power. If indeed, the parliament votes to let it go forward, we're not going to know that till next week.
So I imagine Benjamin Netanyahu is doing whatever he can behind the scenes to, frustrate this effort. But if ultimately he is ousted, how might this impact his corruption trial, which is ongoing?
That's right. The trial is going on now. It would really stop him from trying to throw any more obstacles in front of the trial. There was some speculation that if he got back into Parliament, he would have tried to pass a law protecting himself, similar to what is the case in France, where a sitting prime minister can't be tried. At the moment, the law doesn't say that in Israel, and so he is being tried, and if he's out of power, he can't do anything to stop it now. It's going to go ahead, and it's going to be many months' worth of complicated testimony. But the charges are very serious. You know, they range from accepting bribery and gifts to cronyism to giving favors to certain political allies in the media in return for favorable coverage. So it has a long way to run.
All right, so the big question for us here in the United States, Liz, is how this new deal will impact U.S.-Israeli relations. Following 12 years of Netanyahu leadership, we know that Bibi Netanyahu did not have the warmest of relationships with former President Barack Obama. He had a much warmer relationship with President Trump, former President Trump, and was very, very close to the president's senior advisor, Jared Kushner. I guess Biden is what, in between? I mean, it's not as frosty as it was maybe with Obama, but it's not as warm as it was with former President Trump. So where do you see it going forward if this happens?
Well, Naftali Bennett is not going to have a great relationship with President Biden. I think their policies and their approach to peace in the Middle East is just too divergent. However, Yair Lapid is probably a much more natural fit, and he will, in fact, have a lot of power inside this Israeli government. Probably the Biden administration wants things to settle down. They would like to push forward some kind of a peace plan. In fact, they're on the record as saying that, but not one that creates huge ructions, because the truth is that the Biden foreign policy really wants to pivot to China and Asia, and they need a lot of diplomatic energy and talent applied to that. There's no question that Benjamin Netanyahu was not going to have the same close and friendly relationship with President Biden as he did with President Trump. So there was rough water ahead one way or another. We don't know yet whether it will be just as rough with Naftali Bennett. But there's a possibility it could be more cordial and more productive. We'll just have to see. There's so many unknowns, and also it's just not clear whether this coalition can come up with policies that they, for example, on the settlements or the West Bank or Gaza, that they could take to the States and say, here's a plan, because it's hard to imagine they would actually agree on a plan. All
right, we'll see what happens. Liz, always great to have you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.